find such a love at our age. Whoever thought we could dance on a
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I'm your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. Judy, what is today's fascinating topic? And I really mean that.
Why is it so hard to talk about money? An interview with Carl Richards.
We just had a delightful interview with Carl Richards,
did.
who many of our listeners perhaps will have heard of. He's quite well known. I think we'll just let him speak for himself. But really fascinating guy, and loved his book too. Your Money is the one that we were talking about. So do check that out. Before you do that, I just want to put in a couple of plugs for some things here.
Okay.
First of all, I want to plug your book because it's always good to plug your book. Plug your book.
Plug my book. Okay. Well, it for readers who like erotica or have never read erotica but are curious, it's a really good entry into it. It's called The Blue Tent: Erotic Tales from the Bible, and I use a pseudonym, Laria Zilber. So that is available wherever books are sold.
And you can find in the notes for this, if you're listening to this or watching it, in the episode notes for this, there's a link to lariazilber.com. Also, put in a plug for my books. I want to especially put in a plug for my video course.
Yes.
I have one that is out now, and I have another one that should be out possibly by the time you are seeing or hearing this, depending on when that is. But we're recording this, what is this, April 10th, 2026. And my course should be done probably in a week or two, and it'll be available. But the one that's out there now is called The Passion Paradox. And folks who have been taking it have been, what I've been hearing is that it's been very helpful to them. It is a way of understanding the whole business of being in a couple that I hope you will find, and many people have found, like a light bulb moment. And it helps you get a handle on what's going on. And of course, this is especially if you're in a relationship that is struggling. And if you're interested in doing couples work with someone like me, it's a really wonderful idea to do the video thing first or do the video thing at the same time, either way, because you'll find that it will save you a lot of time in therapy.
Right.
It'll get you set off on what I believe is the right foot. So that you can actually deal with the stuff you're dealing with and not waste a lot of time doing things that are pretty much useless, in my humble opinion. So there we are. So do check that out. And you can find information about that. Just go to my website, brucechalmer.com. Again, link for that will be in the show notes for this episode. So let's get on with our interview.
Okay.
And we'll see you on the other side.
Our guest today is Carl Richards. Carl is a certified financial planner and creator of the Sketch Guy column, which appeared weekly for a decade in the New York Times. Carl has also been featured on Marketplace Money, Oprah.com, and Forbes.com. In addition, Carl has become a frequent keynote speaker at financial planning conferences and visual learning events around the world. Through his simple sketches, Carl makes complex financial concepts easy to understand. His sketches also serve as the foundation for his 2 books, The One-Page Financial Plan, A Simple Way to Be Smart About Your Money, and The Behavior Gap, Simple Ways to Stop Doing Dumb Things with Money. Carl, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Judy, thanks for having me. Bruce, it's great to be here.
We're delighted to have you. And actually, there's another book that's coming out, I think, or is it already out? The book called Your Money?
Yeah, out in October. It was out in October. So we're about to celebrate 6 months, which is a great time.
Oh, wonderful.
So, yeah.
We will be asking you about that.
Red.
Yes.
Yes, we got a copy of that and are delighted with it. And that's really one of the main reasons we invited you on. So we always like to start off with our guests asking, how did you get into this work that you do? Tell us something about your own journey.
Oh, yeah. So it's actually quite a funny story. Back in 1995, I was newly married, and my wife had graduated with a degree in finance, and I was an undeclared major, which back then that meant you had no clue what you wanted to do with your life, right?
Right.
I came home one day and she had the help wanted ads open. She had a job, a really good job, and she had the help wanted ads open, the big fold out version that we used to have, right? And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm looking for a job." I said, well, you already have one. She said, I know, I'm looking for you. And I was like, oh, great. Great. What did you find? And she found what we both thought was like an evening security guard job, like a mall cop or something. And I was like, well, you know what? I could do that because I can still go to school full time. That would be great. I could work the evening shift and security guard job. It's something to do with security. So I went to apply for the job and um, I got halfway through the interview and they hadn't asked me anything about kung fu or self-defense, and I was kind of confused because they were asking me about things I'd heard of, but I certainly didn't know what they were, like stocks and bonds and mutual
Ah,
funds.
securities.
Yeah, and I was like, it turns out the ad said securities, not security, and I didn't know the difference, and somehow it tells you a lot about the applicant pool that day because somehow I landed the job, and that got me on the 2 weeks later, I found myself at Fidelity Investments had their largest call center in the country here in Salt Lake during the time, or their one of their two large call centers here in Salt Lake during the time. And so I got into the financial advice
Mm-hmm.
business quite by accident, right? But
Yeah.
I stayed because real quickly I mean, I remember the first couple of weeks I was trying to figure out what I was doing, and I was like, okay, it's not a security guard job. What is it? And I was like, it seems to be a math job, right?
Ah,
Everybody's using calculators and spreadsheets, and this seems to be a math job. And then my first interaction with a client or customer helped me realize like we weren't talking about math.
yep.
There was all sorts of feelings flying around the room, and I was like, I don't understand this. And so I stayed because of that kind of realization that like this was not about math. It
Mm-hmm.
was about humans. And then when you add a spouse or partner, you've got dynamics that are really, really endlessly curious. And so that's how I
All about
got
relationships. Yeah.
into, yeah, how the role that money play. I mean, it's so crazy. We don't the role that money plays in a relationship, and we never talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody warned
Not
me.
enough.
I mean, we've
Mhm.
been married 31 years, so it's worked out okay. But man, every major, we call them heated discussions. Every major heated discussion we've had in our house, almost every one, at its root had something to do with money
Mm-hmm.
or the scarcity around money or the fear around money or something that would cost money for the kids.
Mm.
So I've stayed because of that. And I could tell you multiple stories about, the New York Times column, the books, all kind of happening the same way, like really fortuitous accidents that I was willing to say yes to and figure out later. So
Wow.
it's been a really fun journey.
Yeah, that's an inspiring journey. As you were describing that, folks who know our podcast may know this about me or may not. Between the two of us, Judy is a retired educator. I'm a psychologist. I do couples therapy, but I used to be a statistician way back when, and
Wow.
I was teaching a course in graduate course in statistics when I had just gotten my PhD in psychology on the research side, and I
Wow.
was realizing, you think statistics is all about math, but
Right.
actually when
Right.
you're working with researchers and you're trying to help them understand their data, it's as much about the relationships as it is anything else. I
For
had
sure.
occasions in my office when I would have researchers there in tears because I had to be the one to tell them that they weren't going to get the information they needed from the experimental design they'd created.
Yeah.
And so and then ultimately I ended up going into clinical work entirely because I realized, yeah, it's not just about math. It's about how people interact with that, which is ultimately about their relationship to each other and to the world. So
It's
I've been sort of
so
inspired by your story.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me that these things that we think like in conversations around money and financial planning in the investment world, we have this real physics envy problem where we think there's going to be some like ultimate objective truth.
Mm-hmm.
We go into these conversations with a spouse or partner because of that assumption, expecting it to be a math discussion. 2 plus 2 always equals 4. But 2 plus 2 never equals envy or fear or greed. And I think you end up finding yourself unmoored because all I did was open the American Express bill and suddenly we're in a fight and you're like, I thought this was like so it's like touching an electric fence that you
Mm.
didn't know was electric.
Mhm.
And I think you're pointing to the same thing. Like, in the end, it all comes down to sort of human behavior and our feelings about something, and if you're not careful, it clouds every experiment you run.
Sure does. I was, as I was reading your book, I was looking at it through a couple's lens because that's what we talk about here. And I was struck by how much of what you're saying in your book about finances really is about, like you said, relationships and feelings. Like
Mhm.
one of the things when you said connecting money to life values is essential. And when you're doing that in a partnership, it's even more essential,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's interesting. So many of these things sound really like when I mean one of the things I've tried to do and the sort of the column every week gave me practice because I got lots and lots and lots of feedback from
Mm.
from discerning readers that didn't mind sharing in the comment section of the New York Times. When you try to get things distilled down to what matters, they can often sound a borderline cliche, right? Like
Hmm.
aligning money with what matters to you in your life is essential. Yeah,
Mhm.
of course. But boy, when you go to try to do it and you realize both parts of that, like a lot, your use of capital, like how you're actually spending or saving, that's a really tricky situation. But if you're trying to align it with what's important to you, it turns out you don't know what's important to you often. Like
Hmm.
you thought $5 million in a sailboat was what matters because you read it on Instagram 10 years ago, and now you go do it and you're like, I don't even like sailing. So this stuff's always moving, and it's a very dynamic, what is often referred to as a complex adaptive system.
Hmm.
And in a relationship, every time you touch the system, you change the system.
Yeah,
So
and it's
every
feeding back on itself. It's a chaotic process,
that's
you
right.
know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Beyond complex, it's borderline chaos.
Hmm.
Yeah, so getting clear about money is one of those sorts of conversations that can lead to surprising results that you're sort of like, "Whoa, I didn't know that." I mean, I've had the number of times I've had couples learn things about each other that they did not know 10, 20, 30 years into a relationship in my office or in conversation. I mean, I had my wife on my podcast after 28 years of marriage, and she helped me understand that a story I'd been telling all over the world about her and her relationship to money was wrong. And I
Yeah.
was like, what do you mean? I've been telling it all over the world. She's like, I know, and it's wrong. And so I learned something that I had been sure of about a person I know better than anybody on the planet for 28 years. So yeah, it's
And one
it's complicated.
In one of your columns, I noticed that you had asked people to say, do you have trouble talking about money with your spouse? And, people were saying yes, no. And one of the answers that came in that yes, I have trouble talking about it with your spouse was your spouse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, look, that now that you've opened that can of worms, Judy, we got to tell the whole story. So there's
Okay,
like
please do.
20,000. I mean, I'd written that in the column, and then I also sent it out to my email newsletter, and there was 25, 30,000 people on this newsletter. So we had learned to not ask for long stories. We'd get a much better response if we just said, hit reply, say yes or no.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
then we could re-engage with that person and say, "Hey, would you mind telling me a story?" And we'd get these really great stories. And so I sent this out to whatever, let's just call it 20,000 plus people. And so we got lots and lots and lots of replies. And I read every one. So I was ripping through them and it was like, no, or almost all of them were, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's hard. The question was, do you find it challenging to talk with your spouse or partner about money? Just to hit yes or no. Yes, 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 yes. And I get to one and it's like, yes. It says, yes, it's really hard, always defensive. Did you spend too much? Did I spend too much? Now, my wife has a degree in finance. Like she has a background with money. So it's not, it was like, this is like 3 paragraphs long of like how hard it was. And I was like, wow, this is really hard. I get to the bottom and it was signed, literally, it was signed the spouse. And I look up at the address and it was my wife. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So yeah, turns out it's hard.
Yeah, yeah. I just love that concept, when you're talking about the idea that you can think you know something and then come to discover it's not right. The of the books I've written, the one that has the snarky book title is called "It's Not About Communication: Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy Is Wrong." And I
Right.
point out in that book that that applies to me too. Everything I know about couples
Yeah.
therapy is wrong too. It's the knowing, and that that phenomenon that yeah, I couldn't know how I feel about something because I feel multiple ways about it anyway, and I don't even know about them all. They only come up when I encounter them. So that
Gosh, it's
phenomenon
so
that
yeah.
we're all multiple people anyway. That's a Jill Bolte Taylor. Do you know that name?
I don't. I
She's the
don't.
you may have heard of her. Her famous TED Talk is My Stroke of Insight.
Mm,
She's a neuroscientist who had a left hemisphere
mm,
stroke, kind of wiped out her left hemisphere for
mm.
many years. She recovered and wrote some fascinating stuff about it. But she points out that really, and she's very whimsical about it, but she points out we're all at least four different people
Yeah.
because we have these different brain structures that are more or less independent. And so there's the part that might think it's $5 million in a sailboat. And then there's another part that thinks, no, no, it's just about relationships. And there's another part that's thinking, oh, but I have to make sure that I've planned everything. I have a careful budget and account for every penny. And, all those things can coexist in the same person.
And there's the bragging factor.
Well, you say more about that.
Well, that you're showing off to people
Yeah.
that, you
Oh, of course.
you're making yourself look like you're achieved a certain level of economic success and
Yes.
financial success.
Yeah, and that can run
Yeah.
counter to the relationship factor, for example,
Exactly.
or that can make you do stuff that you end up saying, but I don't even like sailing. So,
Mm.
yeah.
There's so much to unpack. Let me just real quickly comment on one thing. I just yeah, it's so smart. I mean, I mean, I'm thrilled that I can partially turn this into a therapy session for myself. But like my wife sometimes will like the 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 whiplash of like, wait, yesterday I thought we were moving to China. Like my in my no, today I just want to be stable here. Look, we planted the tree in the backyard, and then the next day I'm like, can we go off to Africa? And I think there's like both of those are true. Both of
Yes,
those are parts of
yes.
me, and it's interesting to me, and I think your audience will really relate to this that they're it's really challenging. I mean, it turns out all the work, Rene Girard's work on mimetic desire, that we're
I'm not
really,
familiar with that. Yeah.
yeah, he's a Stanford professor, passed away a while ago, but philosopher. Mimetic desire is this idea that we don't really know what we want. We're just
Yes.
mimetic machines. Like from the
Mhm.
youngest age, we look, and I saw this the other day in the airport, about a 2-year-old girl and her 4-year-old sister. And the 2-year-old was just following the 4-year-old, anything the 4-year-old was doing, the 2-year-old wanted to do.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just continues, and when I was growing up, I remember we had, I was 8, we lived up in Park City, Utah, and um, we all had little BMX bikes, and I remember I know that I had a slightly better bike than some of my friends, and some of my friends had a slightly better bike than me. And I just remember maybe wanting a slightly better bike or like better grips or that like that. But I didn't know at the time that I was supposed to want a private jet, and now I
Uh,
do.
uh-huh.
Instagram has taught me that I'm supposed to want, the villa in France or a private
Mm-hmm.
jet. And
Hmm.
so it's gotten even harder because our
Yeah.
comparison set has gotten so out of control. And
Yeah.
we don't even, to one thing you pointed out, like the appearance and the bragging factor, like we don't even know anything close to the reality about the people that we're comparing to anyway.
Hmm.
So it really is this push. The answer ends up being like, man, we got to get even more clear internally about what we want and run little experiments to see how, if we're right about that, and then obviously continue the experiment forever because, as you pointed out earlier, it's going to change,
Hmm.
right? And so I think that is, to me, that's a good relationship with money is like getting clear about what is it that the never-ending process of
Well,
getting
and that's
clear
it.
about what you want.
That clarity you're describing, it's sort of it has that interesting feature. It's sort of part of clarity is realizing it's never totally clear because it's subject to change all the time.
That's right. Yeah,
So
yeah,
is it a minute
and you got
clear?
to bounce it against your spouse or partner.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
what the conversation becomes, what do I want? What do you want? What do we want?
Mm-hmm.
And that tension, this is one mistake I made forever, and I'm still making it, but I'm trying to be better about it, is like thinking that that tension's something that will be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
And once I get it resolved, life will be good.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of realizing that that tension actually keeps, that's the kind of tension that holds bridges up.
Yes, it's the tension's a feature, not a bug.
That's
That's
right. And it will never be
yes.
resolved. And we'll
Yeah.
have to be like, oh, okay, well, and then we get this never-ending series of trade-offs
Mm-hmm.
of like, when do I want to give a bit? When are you going to give a little bit? When are we both in sync? Like, and it's just this beautiful dance. And there's one line in the book that if I had to read, the book was 11 years in the making. My last book was out 11 years ago. So if I had to redo the whole thing over for this one line, it's about this. It's about and the line is, your values aren't at war, they're in conversation.
Yes.
Right. And if
That's
we could,
beautiful. Yeah.
and I often have this feeling of like, maybe with one of the kids or something about money will come up, and I come from a background where it was very stressful, and I'll feel it in my body, and I'll feel the quote unquote war starting. My desire to run or to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really working hard on translating that feeling into like, oh no, this is the thing,
Yes.
right? I don't ever actually plan on resolving this. I'm just going to turn it from war to conversation.
Yeah. Regular listeners to our podcast will recognize the bit about tolerating anxiety, right? That's we once speculated that if people listened and every time I said the word tolerating anxiety, they took a shot, they'd be
All
shot
right.
by the
It's
end
a
of the
drinking
podcast.
game.
It's a
Yeah.
drinking game, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what you were, yeah, I'm translating that into my favorite
Yeah.
terminology. Intimacy is all about tolerating anxiety, not avoiding it.
Can I
And
ask you a question about the
yeah.
use of word there? I'm so curious about this. Like, because I spent a lot of time in like navigating uncertainty and risk in
Hmm.
like avalanche terrain, in the mountains and in the markets, my two favorite places to spend time.
Mm.
And tolerance for ambiguity is a phrase we use a lot there.
Hmm.
And what is it about explain anxiety, that choice of word there? I think that's really fascinating.
I think I'm using it in a very similar way, actually. In other words, the idea that you're going to feel some bodily unease when you're confronting something that has all that uncertainty in it, where there are consequences. My God, I can't imagine. I haven't gone into avalanche country, and I'm pretty, we're pretty careful, and I think in terms of investing, we tend to be really like lots of index funds.
It's
That's
good. It's
that's
good.
kind of
Yeah.
where our
Yeah.
tolerance is. So I'm not going into avalanches, but that to be able to contemplate, okay, there's some danger here, but there's also a draw, and it's worth tolerating that anxiety in any intimate relationship. By which I simply mean anybody with whom you want to be honest, even though it's risky to be honest because you're not sure how they're going to receive it. That requires that you recognize that buzz of I call it anxiety, that buzz of discomfort that feels like, oh, I'm not sure how this is going to go, and it could be consequential. You have to be able to go ahead anyway. And you have stuff in your book that so fits that. The idea
Yeah.
of get in
Can
over
I?
your head.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to talk, but can I just now I'm learning so much.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Is there something about the use of the word anxiety versus maybe something like ambiguity that gets at bodily sensation? Because that's a very interesting distinction. And I was wondering, like, does
Yeah.
ambiguity point at that? I don't know that it does. Were
Well,
you
you
intent?
can have an anxiety attack, but not an ambiguity attack.
Yeah, yeah. This is
Good
very.
point.
I
Yeah.
quite like this. I spend
I
a lot
hadn't
of
thought of
time.
that.
I spend a lot of time thinking about single words. Like
Yeah.
there's some single words in the sketches that have bothered me for a decade that I've changed, and been like,
Uh-huh.
oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's an example in there of one word I removed, and I was like, there it is. So the ambiguity word's interesting, and anxiety is tolerant of anxiety is
I
super
think it
interesting.
ups the ante. Until this conversation, I hadn't thought about that. It's really interesting questions you're asking. That it ups the ante, I guess. Rather than if I were going to say tolerant ambiguity, that sounds cognitive. That sounds like,
It
well, I
sounds
have,
removed a bit, even like
yeah,
less
yeah,
embodied.
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. And this is much more about emotion.
Mm.
It's much
Mm.
more about the sense of
Plus, I
fear.
think the stakes are higher too,
Yeah,
with
yeah,
anxiety rather than ambiguity. I mean, if you want to tell your partner something, um, For example,
Uh,
if let's get into the sexual area. So you want to tell your spouse something that she's doing that has been bothering you for like 5 years, but you've been afraid to bring it up because you know that she's going to freak out about it. That's anxiety. That's not
uh,
ambiguity. There's no black and white in there.
yeah, that's really, really
So your
interesting.
stakes are a lot higher when you've got anxiety.
Yeah, and yeah, it's so interesting because I really feel like what the type of leadership, personal leadership, this time is requiring of us. And this particular time I'm pointing at simply because the levels of uncertainty are higher than any time I can remember in my life, and I don't think we're going back.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Like I heard Seth Godin, the marketing, author, writer, say, if you feel like it's uncertain now, this is the most certain it will ever be. Like I don't know that we're going back. And the desire to go back is, we've got even political phrases about the desire to go back is causing internal and external, I'm going to just use the word volatility or violence, right? Like that's
Yeah. Yeah.
we really want to go back. And I think what's being required, and this fits in financial decision making, of course, is we got to be able to sit in the uncertainty longer.
Yeah.
Like and it's a different level. It's no longer about knowing exactly how my 30-year financial plan is going to work out. There may have been a brief window in history of the world where people who looked a certain way, largely who look like me and you,
Mm.
had a period of a very predictable path.
Hmm.
Graduate that first year, you can buy a house, stay there for 30 years, it's going to be great.
Mm.
There might have been a brief period in history where that was true, but it's no longer true necessarily. At least it's true for a much smaller group of people. I don't even know who those people are or where they live, but it's smaller. So it's a different time.
Yeah.
And back then it was about control and predict. Like financial plan was like make sure you have that 30-year line perfect.
Hmm.
Now it's much more about how do I operate in anxiety? How do I operate in ambiguity? How do I tolerate uncertainty? It's about the ability to operate even when you can't reduce the uncertainty.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
really
And
interesting to me.
our podcast is called Couples Therapy in 7 Words. Well, I'll tell you the 7 words. I won't bother giving the whole origin story, but it goes way back early in my practice. It's sort of, how do you do couples therapy? Well, it boiled down to be kind, don't panic, and have faith.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
the kind in the sense of kinship, not just be
Yeah.
nice, but to experience that kinship, you have to not be panicking. Well, faith is the opposite, is the antidote to panic, and by which I'm not referring to religious faith per se.
Sure.
I've known religious people who don't seem to manifest this, and non-religious people who do. I'm referring to a mindset that
Sure.
exactly what you're talking about. That okay, here we are in a period of it's like Rumsfeld's unknown unknowns,
Yeah, that's right.
like
That's right.
uncertainty, which we don't see ending soon. We're going to have to be okay with that. And the mindset of faith just says something about this whole existence business is still right to be what it is. We've evolved the way we've evolved. Or if you're religious, God created us a certain way, or whatever, however you
Love
want to
that.
say that, that it's somehow livable. And
Love
so
that.
if you just figure we're going to figure it out even if we don't know how. And we're
Yeah.
all going to die anyway. And I don't mean that in a bad sense. I mean that in a
Yeah.
sense of, you don't have to get it perfect. You just have to do the best
Right.
you can. That
Yeah,
mindset will get you through.
yeah, it's almost like in a MacGy, like we're really bad at risk management. We're really bad at projecting how we're going to solve a problem in the future.
Hmm.
Humans are really bad at that, but we're really good when the problem actually shows up and we have to solve it in a MacGyver sort of way. Like you've got bubble
Yeah.
gum, I've got duct tape, and I think that faith is the same. Like with money, I mean, I'm having these conversations a lot with my kids, right? My adult kids right now, like about how am I going to be able to ever afford a house?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
because the reality is where we live, we couldn't afford to live here right now if we hadn't have
Mm.
bought 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're saying a lot of things like, I don't know. But,
Yeah.
let's just keep taking here, insert faith. Let's just keep taking the next step and we'll figure it out. Like we're going to
Mm.
have to figure it out. And that may mean a completely different thing. It's going to mean a completely different thing than
Yeah.
it meant for us 30 years ago when we bought our first home.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, indeed.
Another one of the things that I thought was one of your quotes that I liked was investment extends beyond money to include energy, time, and attention, which is something you can say for couples even not with money. So
Yeah.
I like the fact that you're looking at money as not just money, but it goes
Yeah.
beyond that.
Yeah. Can we talk about attention just for a minute?
Mm.
Sure.
Yeah. So I call those the four sources of capital: money, energy, time, and attention. Meta, if you want to remember it. Money, energy, time, and attention. I'm interested in all of them, but I've been super fascinated with attention lately, um, because it seems to be important. Like the richest people in the world right now are not railroad barons. They're titans of attention. They're
Hmm.
merchants of attention, right? They
That's what the
basically,
algorithms are all about, right?
yeah, they basically have
Get that.
collectively packaged up our attention and they're selling it. And I don't know what that means other than it must be valuable.
Hmm.
And one thing that I'm really interested in is I've been saying lately that the price of a great relationship is paid with attention. Like this phrase of pay attention.
Yeah.
That's the cost. And here's the example I give. Like if I take my daughter skiing, I'm going to spend money. I'm going to certainly spend some energy. It will cost me some time, or I'll invest some time. I could do all three of those the day skiing, and everybody listening to this will have had this experience where been you've done an event with all three of those present,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and the person wasn't there,
Hmm.
right? Like it could be as obvious as staring at their phone at dinner, or just simply as thinking about, like, I'm skiing and I'm thinking about something at work and I'm not engaged with my daughter. Now, the vector of whether that was a good experience for my daughter is going to hinge on attention.
Hmm.
If I don't pay attention while I'm there, we could leave and that could actually be something she texts her friends on the way home about, like, yeah, my dad was busy with work all day. It
Hmm.
wasn't actually skiing was fine. Or she could say, like, that was the most amazing day skiing. And it all vectors on attention.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm sort
you
of,
could say, I mean, conversely, you could also add the 10 minutes of attention you give her, not skiing, not taking all that time, can be incredibly important in the context of someone's life. It's like she'll remember that. She'll remember, oh
yeah.
my God, he was really listening to me.
Yeah, and what's
That.
so remarkable about that is that everybody listening if I ask the question, like, can you remember the last time somebody was that attentive to you, where
Mm,
you felt seen and heard?
Hmm.
And everybody listening can either A, not remember a time, which
mm,
wouldn't be unusual, but
mhm.
terribly sad for all of us, right? Or B, the time was so remarkable that they remember it. I had this experience. I don't know if it's in the book, but I had this experience. We had this amazing summer years ago. I didn't even have a passport when I was young. Like the idea of an international vacation, something so foreign to me. We had this amazing summer where, just because of some speaking engagements I was doing, we went to two or three different countries, and France, and we went to Paris was among them. I remember after that summer, just feeling so like, this is amazing that we did that. And I was having a conversation with my son. I was like, hey, and he was young, can't remember how old, but what was the highlight of your summer? And I was thinking, the frog legs in Amsterdam, or or the Eiffel Tower. And he was like, you remember that time we were skipping rocks in the lake by the house?
Mhm.
And I was like, no, 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 no. I mean, like, what was the highlight of your summer? He was like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that time
Yeah.
and it wasn't the lake per se. It was the quality of the attention that was going on at that moment. That could have happened in France too, but it doesn't need to be France. And that was
Hmm.
just a good reminder to me that attention, I think it's the most interesting, and I dare say most valuable source of capital that we have.
Yeah. Now, see, in my terminology, that's what I call intimacy.
Yeah,
It's
beautiful.
almost exactly what I mean by intimacy. It's
Yeah,
where people have that sense of actual connection. They're actually present and honest and there.
yeah,
That's and we need that. That
so
my
good.
whole thesis, which I just certainly did not invent, couples need both stability and intimacy. And
Hmm.
if you just have stability, the lack of intimacy becomes destabilizing. People will find a way of metaphorically cracking the sidewalk. If the plant's trying to grow through and you put a sidewalk in the way of the plant growing, it'll crack the sidewalk or try or die trying.
Yeah.
And what a couple will do is they'll crack the sidewalk if there's not intimacy. And what does that look like? It might be an affair. It might be somebody all of a sudden bailing on the relationship. It might
Mm.
be arguing about everything and nothing. All of those things are symptoms. And it's interesting the way you're using attention. I'm thinking, yes, it's that's what I'm talking about. It's that focus
Yeah.
on each other.
How do the two of you see this come up? Like, I'm curious about your experience with couples and this idea of money. Like how does financial intimacy show up? Like what
Mm.
does that even mean?
I can speak to that.
Well, you're the
Yeah,
therapist,
that's
so
right. I'm the one who sees couples. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you could speak to it on your own
well,
experience too.
yeah, my first marriage, I would
Yeah.
say that was like the big killer.
Ah, is that right?
Yeah.
That came up a lot.
What do you mean?
Oh, we were so financially unstable, and I was working three jobs and supporting the ex on his artistic endeavors. Somehow he didn't think it was that important that he should actually get a job. And, so it, it,
Wow.
it put a lot of tension in the marriage. And, you get to the breaking point where it's like, I'm done. I'm done.
Did you know that at the time, or is it with the benefit of hindsight that you knew that money was at the center of a lot of this?
Well, I knew that money was at the center of it, but in hindsight, I can articulate it a lot better now to see just the destructive force that it put on us, that I was trying to, tamp down.
Uh,
Um, my problems, my criticisms. I didn't want to put pressure on my spouse,
yeah.
but it just got to a breaking point where we were, like Bruce said, fighting about everything but what it really is. So there
Did,
was that lack of intimacy to be able to
mm,
express myself because it was just very dangerous for the relationship, which ultimately ended at my instigation anyway.
wow.
So that's
But,
that, that's something personally I can address, but in terms of how,
well, wait, we can't move on quite yet.
Mm,
Did
yeah.
okay.
did did you have the back then, did you have any of the tools to either of you have any of the tools to actually have conversations about money? Or were you like the rest of
No,
us
not
where,
really. I grew
yeah.
up in a household that was very financially unstable and money was a big
Did you
problem.
did you know that back when you were younger, or is that with the benefit of hindsight?
Oh, no, no, I knew that was like my parents every day. It's like
Wow. Wow.
the bill collector's calling and, this and that. And it was
Okay.
very financially unstable. We have four kids and it was tough. It was tough.
But nobody really talked about it in a direct or honest
No,
way.
no. So I didn't have the tools to talk about it
Isn't
either.
that wow? Well, Judy, first of all, thank you. I know you probably didn't come on thinking I was going to ask you a bunch of questions, but
No, but
that's
that's where the
amazing.
conversation goes.
Yeah, I'm so interested in the fact that often when you have something showing up in your life regularly, that experience leads you to gain the tools to deal with the thing. But with money, it often doesn't because it's still I, I I've heard that kind of a variation of that kind of story over and over, and I
Oh, I'm
certainly lived it
sure.
too, where it was literally the air we were breathing, but nobody ever talked about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was too terrifying. It
It's
just, on
so
some level, it's too terrifying for reasons. One of the things I love about that, thinking about it in terms of intimacy requiring tolerance of anxiety, one of the reasons I like that concept is that it doesn't require that you invoke any sort of pathology. Nobody
mm,
has to be crazy or evil or stupid for this to
mm,
happen. It
mm.
happens to intelligent, decent human beings who find that something is just too scary to talk about. And of course, when you've grown up in an environment where you know how dangerous it is to talk about. That's why no one talked about it. They
Mm.
didn't even talk about that they couldn't talk about it. You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
Just thought
It's
about it.
it would be fighting, but it just means,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is dangerous territory. We
Mm-hmm.
don't, third rail. You just don't go there. So
Yeah.
to be able to get past that, it does require, I think, perspective certainly helps, maturity, perspective, and getting out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
that's
so
that's
it's
really helps.
so to me like this is the reason I've despite applying to be a security guard, the reason I've stayed and the reason I'm more excited about the next decade of the work is
Mm.
this conversation. Just because it's like and it seems to be touching on something deeply primal You
Mm-hmm.
know, this and independent of gender, this idea of provide and protect, the idea of like scanning the landscape for threats. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm deeply like I'm hyper aware, and I think that's because I grew up in an environment where I there were no rules. I mean, I grew up in a great neighborhood with a great, my parents were divorced when I was 8, so the rules seemed to vanish.
Uh,
It wasn't in any way dangerous.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a great neighborhood with great people. I had a great scoutmaster. Like there was nothing dangerous, except for the fact that there was no rules for me.
Mm.
And so I never knew the rules. And so I'm constantly scanning like in the car. I know at all times every mirror. Now, that's I can point to at least 2 events where that saved my life or my family's life.
Mm.
But that's 2 events out of 10 million
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
scans, you know? And so I noticed literally yesterday, walking to the mailbox. We have always had a mailbox that you had to walk to for some reason, you know, 100 yard, not far, but I've noticed, I know, and I had the experience again yesterday where we'll get to the mailbox, open it, and there's a envelope from either the IRS or the state of Utah, you know,
Mm.
and yesterday was the I've been talking about this a lot lately on this book tour, that for years when that would happen, I'd just my whole body would tense up. I'd rip that envelope open. I would check it,
I can
and
relate. I've been there.
yeah, and I didn't know really why. And I mentioned that to my dad once at Father's Day. I don't see my dad all that often, but I saw him on Father's Day this last year, and I mentioned it to him, and he was sort of like, "What do you mean you don't know why?" And I was like, I don't know why." He's like, "You don't know?" And I was like, "No." And then he went on to tell me this story about his experience making a mistake that almost led to prison time, you
Oh
know,
my.
with
Yeah.
the business, and I remember this vaguely in the air, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. And yesterday, I'm only bringing this up because I've been working really hard at this. You know, I opened the mailbox. I hadn't thought anything of it. I opened the mailbox. There's a letter from the IRS, and I went to open it, and I was like, no. And I decided to take the long way home, even just be like, I'm going to walk even further.
Mm-hmm.
I got home. I sat down. I took a deep breath. I opened it. It was a change. Like it was just, hey, we realized you changed your address from your business to your home. Like it was benign.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think that when you're pointing to something dangerous or terrifying, it's that level of like protection, food, shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And we've translated like every bush there's a lion,
Yeah.
every envelope is a disaster, you know, and until we unwind that bodily experience,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like we're going to keep having things. What was that? What's that great quote? Like, till we make the subconscious conscious, it will run our lives and we'll call it fate,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
So
it's
it's super
indeed.
interesting.
And of course, you know, evolution, as we've developed these capacities, it tends to be relatively efficient, which is to say, we're using a lot of the same bodily mechanisms to feel afraid about a letter from the IRS as we use for when we're about to be attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. So
Right.
it's going to feel, or if our spouse says something a little bit, you know, nasty or
Right.
not nice, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, we just find ourselves hijacked like that. And you're like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
that was just a comment, you know, or
Yeah,
that was just the American Express bill, you know?
yeah, yeah. And the good news is that one can, I think, with maturity, with experience, you know, processing trauma is all about that, whatever in the psychological world, when we use that sort of term,
Mm,
it just means a process by which your brain learns that being reminded of it isn't dangerous, even if the thing itself was dangerous. Thinking
that's
about
right.
it isn't dangerous. So the memory is no
That's
longer
right.
dangerous. And that,
Y-
you know, much of that happens below the level of consciousness. And so
Yeah.
you don't have to freak out if you're reminded of something that was in fact dangerous, but you're okay now.
Yeah, I've really loved the idea of like from a posture perspective, sort of turning to that behavior that was at one point adaptive.
Hmm.
You know, like it kept you alive, Judy. You know, like
Yes.
in a maybe metaphorical, but maybe a literal sense.
Yeah.
And it certainly, you know, generations ago, not thinking about whether the wrestling in the bushes was a lion or not. Like I didn't have time to think,
Hmm.
right? That kept us alive as a species. And now turning to that behavior, like my 8-year-old behavior, where I didn't know the rules and saying, hey, thank you for that help. And now acknowledging like, and I got it from here. Like that behavior has become maladaptive in my life now. And it turns out I don't need to, I have time to decide if this is a lion or not.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
the IRS letter, I have time to decide
Mhm.
if this is a lion or not. And it
And
turns
you
out
notice what you did.
it
You
never is a
gave
lion.
you took the long way home. You
That's
gave
right.
yourself more practice in that, which is exactly the process one
Yeah.
uses. Any of the therapies that are effective in helping somebody heal from trauma does that pretty much. You
Just
take the long way
space.
home and don't open the envelope.
That's right. Space between the stimulus and the response.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. So good. Thank
Yeah.
you. Tell me where to send the check for the therapy session.
Well, we could say the same, actually. Thank
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
indeed, maybe we'll come around to that right now. Thank you for doing this. How can people find your, I mean, you are well known. You're a get, I want to tell you, by the way. We're delighted to have you. I mean, we're delighted to
Oh,
have all our guests. I don't want to
sure.
compare it's like comparing your children. I don't want to do that, but
We don't want
Right.
hey, this has especially been fun. Let's put it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, how can people get in touch with you and find out what you offer?
Yeah, the easiest way probably is to go to behaviorgap.com. And if you enjoyed this conversation, we send something out every week about it's basically it's the shortest, most impactful weekly email on the internet. You know, so it's a sketch with as few words as possible every week in your inbox. And then, of course, the book is available wherever you buy books. It's Your Money, Reimagining Wealth Through 101 Simple Sketches.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, Bruce and Judy, it was really a delight. Thanks for
It
having me.
really is. And we could probably talk forever, but we gotta keep it shorter than forever.
Been forever, for sure. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Carl. Well, we hope you enjoyed that interview with Carl Richards as much as we enjoyed having him on our podcast.
We certainly did, indeed. So, Judy, what should people do if they want to make suggestions about, what we ought to talk about?
Yeah, so if you would like to be on our podcast, or if you have a question that you would like us to address on our podcast, you can go to CTIN7, that's the number 7, CTS in Couples Therapy, IN7.com, which is our website. And you could find all our past episodes, information about our books, information about Bruce's,
Video course.
thank you, video courses.
You always want to call it a workshop. Look,
I
a
know,
moment of transparency. I will say why you want to do that.
Yes.
Because I was going to do workshops before I
Right.
decided to turn it into a video course. So
Right.
there you are. That's why you keep thinking workshop.
I keep thinking workshop, but it's
Yeah.
not a workshop. So all those things, if you want to find out more about us and our podcast and all our stuff, please go to ctn7.com.
Absolutely. And so until next time,
Remember, be kind
don't panic.
and have faith.